Today we're talking about a book that makes me cry every single time I read it, and I'm still not sure if that is the desired effect that the author wanted. Today it's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. We are officially deep into spooky season. There's no going back now. And the only time that I will ever talk about this book is in spooky season, October. I think I've read this book for maybe the past 3 Octobers now. There's no way to fact check that, so if I'm wrong, who's gonna know? But anyway, I really like this book for this time of year, and I thought it would be great to talk about this today with you. If you like books that are creepy, little bit on the spooky side, quite disturbing in parts, and for some reason are just really ridiculously sad, then this book will be a good one for you. It's also an absolute classic. This book is old AF, so I'm really excited to talk about this today with you. So let's review Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. If you've read this book, please let me know what you thought to it in the comments below. That would be great. I'd love to keep this conversation going with you. So the first half of this video will contain no spoilers at all. I will hopefully not spoil a single thing for you, but then in the second half I will delve into spoilers and go into a little bit more detail. So if you haven't read this book and you want to, I will let you know when to switch off the video. I would class this as the perfect creepy read for October. It's a great book for this time of year. I believe it was published in 1818, so like I said, elderly to a T. If this book was a person, boy would they need some anti-wrinkle cream. This is classed as a gothic horror. So let's have a little rundown as to what Frankenstein is actually all about. So Victor Frankenstein is a scientist who manages to create a creature. He manages to give life form through his knowledge of science, and his main purpose is to find the meaning of life. What is life all about? However, Victor Frankenstein is a big old prick, and he rejects the creature that he has created because he thinks it's too ugly, essentially. He describes the monster as repulsive, disgusting, casts him out of society. This creature has feelings, you know. Victor Frankenstein has literally created this life form, this being who can think, feel, he can feel emotions. And the first thing that he gets told is that he is ugly by his own creator. Victor says some absolutely horrible things to this poor creature, and that is why it makes me deeply sad. And I feel like I can relate to the monster in some ways. But the monster, I'm going to call it a monster creature, yada yada. It's continuously treated with cruelty and rejection. Nobody accepts this creature. And therefore that does lead to the creature's ultimate motive to get revenge. It has been brought up essentially in a world that treats it terribly. This monster is filled with so much hatred, and it just wants revenge on every part of society, especially Victor Frankenstein. So bit by bit, the monster turns into a pretty insane being, if we're being honest. There's murder in this book, but can you really blame him after all that he's been through? This book features many different narratives, different viewpoints. It has like journal articles, diary entries. There's different sources in here. It's compiled of a lot of really interesting things just to keep it juicy, keep it entertaining. And it is a pretty short book as well, so you can whiz through this thing. So let's delve into my initial thoughts, non-spoilery. This book was not what I was expecting at all when I picked this up. I thought it was going to be scary, horrifying, a bit of a thriller. I wouldn't say it is any of those things. It is on the creepy side, but the main emotion that I felt throughout reading this book was just a deep underlying sadness. And considering it is classed as a gothic horror, you would think that you would feel scared. For example, if I'm comparing it to Dracula, I feel like Dracula is more on like the thriller, scary side. I wouldn't say that Frankenstein is. I know that there's some really, interesting events that happen. You've got your murder, you've got this monster, essentially. You've got a lot of cruelty. So I suppose those are the components that make it into a horror, but to be honest, the main emotion I felt was just a deep sadness. It's just quite a sad book. If you want to feel uplifted and happy in your life, this ain't gonna do it for you. Just being honest. Maybe that's me. Maybe I'm too fragile. The initial assumption that I had prior to reading this book was that the monster was going to be the evil and the cruel one, but that is actually not the case at all. That is Victor Frankenstein, the scientist. In my opinion, he's the cruel one. I mean, I know that Victor Frankenstein is then subjected to some really horrible events that I will go into in the spoiler section. He has some pretty bad turn of events later on in the book, but I'm not saying he deserves it, but he kind of does. I mean, the monster was of his own making. The creature turned into a monster because of Frankenstein, because of the way he treated it. And the monster didn't need to go down that route if he was just given some love and some affection. I think that things would have turned out very, very differently, especially for Frankenstein in the end. And when the monster does start to turn evil and there is quite a build-up to it, I kind of understood it. Like, I'm not giving a justification for people being just generally awful and committing really cruel acts of violence. But because of the build-up that this book goes into, you can kind of understand where it's come from. It's almost like this discussion of nature versus nurture. Was the creature always inevitably going to turn into a monster? Or is it because of the way that his creator treated him and how society treated him? Deep thoughts. I think one of the main themes around this book, or one of the main messages, is that some monsters are not born, they are created by the cruelty around them. Now, I'm not gonna lie, sometimes I lost track of what was going on. Sometimes I had no clue what was happening. There's lots of different events that you hear like different perspectives from in this book, and I do like that because it keeps it interesting, it keeps you wanting to read more, but sometimes I did lose track of what was going on. Now, I'm not sure if that was just because of the writing style back then, like this book is old. I think that maybe it was just the use of language back then, or the writing styles, that sometimes I had to reread certain paragraphs because it just didn't quite process in my mind. I would say it's quite a difficult writing style. I love that we do learn a lot more about the monster than I initially thought we were going to. You know, we learn about their experiences. We also learn an awful lot about Victor Frankenstein. Like, we hear about his childhood, his life through university, what led him to his purpose of trying to find the meaning of life. Like, we get to learn why he's made certain decisions. Basically, you get a lot of backstory to the characters in this book. Now, I've read reviews online that say people thought the backstory was unnecessary, they felt like it was slow-paced, they felt like it was filler. I disagree. I felt like the backstory was necessary. I felt like it was needed so that we could understand the characters more, so that we could empathise with them more, particularly the monster. I think that the author tries to make you feel a shred of remorse for Frankenstein, the scientist. I didn't. I feel like I was filled with so much resentment for him that I felt like I couldn't feel remorse. I couldn't feel the sympathy for him when the bad things start to happen to him. I think I was just filled with a lot of hatred for him. I felt like he was really unlikable. As a character, as a guy, he's just not a particularly nice guy. I don't know if that makes me a terrible person, but I had more sympathy for the monster than I did for Frankenstein, the scientist. Let me know if you agree with me or not. There's a lot of deeper underlying themes and emotions that I will go into in the spoiler section, because a lot of the events that happen in this book kind of link up to that. But the main thing that I will say about this book is that it's just deeply sad, and it's just not at all what I expected to feel when reading it, in a good way. I feel like every so often it's nice to have a book that makes you feel so deeply. I didn't feel creeped out by this. I felt creeped out after reading like Jekyll and Hyde or Dracula. They fit the theme of being like horrifying, creepy, a little bit on the scary side. This didn't. It's very appropriate for October and Halloween, but it is just deeply saddening, in my opinion. I did feel like some parts were a little bit slow. I know I said earlier that I do feel like the pacing was fine. There is like filler, but I feel like it's necessary. It's a good backstory. I felt the only part that was a little bit slow for me was when we were reading from, is it Captain Walton's narrative? Purely because I just didn't really care about him that much. I wasn't really interested in that character. I still enjoyed it, but I just feel like it provided a lot of detail about a character that I don't particularly care about, and that's just my opinion. that's just me. So that basically concludes my non-spoiler section. Overall, I do think that this is a great book to read at this time of year. Obviously I like it because I've reread it a good few times now. It is an absolute classic. It's not like the most fun-filled or action-packed book in the entire world, but I do feel like there is enough stuff that happens in it to still make it be impactful. So if you have not read Frankenstein and you want to and you don't want it spoiled for you, then thanks for watching so far. I would advise you turn off the video because I'm going to talk about the juicy stuff now. I'm going to talk about the full frontal details in Frankenstein. I just had a really long blink. You know, like a blink is normally like, what is it? Like not even half a second, to be honest. But that was like a really long blink. Isn't it weird that I was aware of that? So, spoiler section time! Whoop! I loved that the book started off on a creepy ship setting. There's a ship setting as well in Dracula, and it just gives the ultimate creepy vibe. Like any spooky horror book that is set on a ship just gives ultimate creepy vibes, and I loved that as well. So that's where we start off with having Captain Robert Walton. They do end up rescuing Victor Frankenstein, and at this point he has been nearly frozen to death. This is where Frankenstein starts to retell his story about his experiences with his monster up to this point and what's led him to this stage. One thing that I will say is that I absolutely love when a book starts off at like a climactic point. Is climactic a word? I think so. You know what I mean. A tense point, and then we go back in time to learn how it led to that stage. I love that. So the fact that this book starts off with Frankenstein nearly being frozen to death and the ship being trapped, and we pick Frankenstein up and we get to learn about his experiences that led him to that point, things like that always work well for me. I said that point as well when I reviewed Salem's Lot by Stephen King, which I'll leave in the description box for you if you want to check that out, because the prologue in that book starts off where like the book ends, if that makes sense. That technique by an author always works well for me, and Frankenstein is the exact same. We're learning about the build-up that's led to Captain Walton writing these letters. And although I said that I didn't particularly care about Walton as a character, I didn't really care about him too much. I just really like that the first volume is basically a retelling of what's happened up to that point that led to Frankenstein being frozen to death, and that led to the ship crew all seeing this gigantic creature, and then we go back in time almost, like telling the story. I also particularly enjoyed that we do learn a lot about Victor Frankenstein. We learn about his childhood, we learn about him going to university, his motives for creating this creature in the first place. I feel like it gives a lot more depth to the character. And like I said earlier, I know a lot of people think that that is filler, or it's unnecessary, or it's too much detail. I personally enjoy the amount of detail because it unravels a lot of layers to the character and it gives some depth to him as well, and I just really like that. I particularly enjoy the monster's narrative and his personality. He comes across as quite intelligent and just like all he wants is love and to be loved, or to just make friends essentially, and he's just faced with so much rejection. And then Victor Frankenstein comes across as hugely unlikable, and it also shows the impact that it can have of rejecting somebody at face value. There's also the extremely sad and quite frankly depressing part of the book where the creature tries to befriend a family. He teaches himself to speak, to write, to read, and he believes that he can make a friend in this family, and then they reject him as well. Oh, that cut me deep in the feels. The creature even tries to save a child from drowning. The father immediately assumes that the creature is trying to hurt the child and that he's trying to drown the child, when actually he's trying to save the child instead. And so he attacks the monster. And over time we just start to see how this creature starts off being really kind, but then eventually progresses into becoming an evil character and a murderer due to all the cruelty that he has experienced throughout his life. There's also a very impactful part of this book where the creature expresses to Victor how lonely he is, and he urges Victor to create him a female companion so that he can have a friend that is like him, because he clearly can't make any friends in humans, so therefore he needs another creature to be created so that he can automatically have a best friend, which I thought was really cute. However, due to Victor's just unreasonable cruelty, to be honest, towards this creature, he does actually end up with having both his bride and his friend murdered by the monster. Now again, I am not making a justification for the monster's actions. I am not saying that it's okay that he committed those cruel acts and that he murdered all of Victor's family. It's fine. It's not fine. That's not fine, okay? But you can see why it led him down that path. That's all I'm saying. And I'm very happy in the book because I'm pretty sure, if I remember from memory, that Victor dies, doesn't he? Victor dies. Thank the Lord, hallelujah. This evil, awful man does end up dying. Justice is served. However, that's not enough for the creature. He vows to burn himself and put an end to his existence. But ultimately, there's a lot of death in this book. There is a lot of murder, but there's just a lot of like cruelty, and it's just sad. And I think that there are a lot of deeper meanings around what it means to be human, what the meaning of life actually is, and to not judge people on face value. And again, maybe I'm taking all the wrong messages from this book, and maybe we're not supposed to like the creature as much as I did, but I did. So what does that say about me? But again, maybe Victor didn't deserve to have his whole family murdered. That might have been a stretch too far. Overall, my final thoughts and conclusions: I think this is a great October read. Is it thriller? No. Is it scary? No. Would I even class it as a horror? I don't think so. But obviously it is. Like, I can't go against what it's classed as. It is classed as a gothic horror. I do think it's an absolute classic. I do think it's great for this time of year. Just don't expect to be spooked out, don't expect to be scared when reading it. Again, like I said, it can be slow in some paces, but I feel like that is down to each individual person as to what you're going to find slow. I found some of Captain Walton's diary entries a little bit slow. Other people might have found other parts a bit slow. It's completely up to you. So that is my review on Frankenstein. See, even the blurb triggers me. It says, "This tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, who plunders graveyards to create a new being from the bodies of the dead, but whose botched creature causes nothing but murder and destruction." I don't think that's right. He didn't just do murder and destruction. He just wanted love. Am I missing something here? He just wanted a friend. He just wanted to be accepted by society. I don't think I'm feeling the way that Mary Shelley wanted the reader to feel. If you've read Frankenstein, what did you think? I would love it if you could leave a comment below letting me know what your thoughts and opinions were on this, or if you have any other recommendations of things that you think I should read, then that would be highly appreciated as well. So leave a comment, let's keep this conversation going. I think I'm going to leave it there for today, so thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, which I hope that you did, please make sure to give it a thumbs up to let me know. And if you want to see more from me, then please subscribe because it's free and it means that you can see my videos a lot easier. I will see you next time, or rather you'll see me, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye for now.